Welcome, Mystics, fellow truth seekers. James and Justin here with another video to unpack for you. What are we looking at today?
Leo Gura and his take on death.
Ooh, yeah. This one's called What is Death? And one thing we're going to be doing going forward is we'll try to do at least one of these a week where we grab like a guru, modern day guru. Could be dead actually though. And, we'll opine on it and try and pull out of it what we can. But this one's a little bit lengthy, so we'll let it play out a little bit longer than we normally do before we cut in and all that stuff. The reason we picked this one so soon to our return back to YouTube is because it's relatable. We had a death in our family. Our mother passed away, which was hard, and death's always hard if you're close to someone. So maybe you can relate to this video. I remember listening to this video during that time period and thinking long and hard on it. And parts of it brought comfort to me, so maybe it'll bring some comfort to you. But anyway, we'll let it play out, and you can judge for yourself.
What is death? Well, finally we've come to this ultimate of questions, which I want to answer for you here very clearly, without equivocation. But I hope you can appreciate the depth of this topic.
This is a deep one,
how tricky and challenging it is, and some of the things I'm going to say here are very advanced insights, some of the most advanced insights that you can have about life, reality, and self. And some of the things I'm going to say are going to sound outrageous, are going to sound insane, are going to sound impossible. And yet, they're true, and you can discover for yourself that they're true. So anything that I'm about to say that sounds far-fetched to you, that sounds Looney Tunes to you, that sounds fantastical and impossible, just understand that, first of all, I'm not saying it from a position of ideology or belief. This is not a belief system of mine, number one. Number two, I'm not expecting you to adopt this as an ideology or as a belief system of yours. That's not the intent of this communication. This is, if anything I say has any validity whatsoever, you can validate it for yourself in your own direct experience. And so that's the place that I'm speaking from. If it sounds incredible, that's because it is. It's highly incredible, and yet nonetheless, you can still validate it for yourself without needing to believe me.
Okay, so I think it's important to just stop right there because he makes some very strong statements here, because he is about to say a bunch of stuff I think that is pretty out there. And you're not just to listen to him or any other guru and just believe what they say. It's not about that. It's about going out there and testing and analyzing for yourself and figuring stuff out before you just believe something. Mm-hmm. So, hear what he has to say, and you're going to need an open mind. You're going to need an open eye for what he's about to say. And then, mull over it and try not to judge it. Just think about it and see what resonates and what sticks with you. So
I find with Leo, like with this guy, you often have to have like a taste for outlandish takes on things, because he usually takes a pretty rare position on stuff. It's barely ever mainstream common.
Yeah, nothing about this guy mainstream.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll let it play out for you here.
Now you might say, okay, Leo, fine, but what about actual death? What about physical death? No, you're not getting it. When you tell yourself, but what about actual death? What about physical death? You're imagining that. There's no such thing as physical death. The distinction you draw between some sort of psychological death and the actual physical death, that's part of your identity. That's what you use that distinction to construct your identity, because then you say, well, I exist on this end where the actual death happens. That's what's real. And then this thing here, this psychological mumbo jumbo that Leo is talking about, that's the unreal stuff. This is just philosophy. This is just intellectual mental masturbation. This is the domain where science happens, and this is the domain of bullshit religious nonsense. If you make that distinction, that is the identity that you've constructed for yourself. So you got to remove that distinction. The distinction between the mental and the physical. This needs to go. If you want to understand what death is. It's possible for you to become conscious of or to experience death without actually, what we would say, physically dying. The body doesn't need to die for you to become conscious of what death is, and the reason that's possible is because you never were the body. The body is an identity you constructed for yourself, so you can unconstruct, you can deconstruct that identity, and you can experience what death is, become conscious of what death is, without having to undergo physical death. You don't need to shoot yourself or harm yourself. If you actually were the body, if that was your ultimate identity, then you would have to actually physically harm yourself in order to understand what death is. But that was just a materialist assumption that was never deeply questioned. Now we've questioned it, and when we question it deep enough, we get to the point where we realize that, oh, I don't even need to do that to die. See? And so in this way, what becomes possible is for you to die, as they say, die before you die. Die before the body dies.
I think he's talking about ego death here.
Well, that's the whole thing, is coming from a place of like an enlightened place, I'm assuming, like whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's a regard of death from a non-dual enlightened place.
This is like an advanced, deep, non-dual experience, what he's talking about, and he's going to get even a little bit more, and I'll stop it when he says that. But you got to be a part of this community somewhat to even understand. If you've never heard about non-duality or any of this stuff before, what he's going to say is going to sound like wacky, crazy.
Right. So to make a statement like your ideas of death have to do with your identity is just doesn't even make sense to somebody who's like, what are you talking about? You know.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of us can say we know for sure what he's talking about in that regard, because as far as I know, both of our egos are intact. But yeah, like, you know, that's if you look at any of his existing previous content, he's already, I don't know if he would say that he's enlightened, but the idea I think here is that he's coming from a place of transcended awareness.
Yeah, another word they use is like awakening,
Yeah.
or stuff like that. And he's definitely talking about awakening and levels of awakening. So I'm sure there's levels to all this stuff. But anyway, right, we'll let him continue on.
You might wonder, Leo, how do you know? How do you know this is true? Well, this is not a belief that I hold, of course. This is something I've directly become conscious of and that I've experienced. I've died many times, and I've gone through this process
There
to
you
the
go.
point where
Bold statement.
it's not even a big deal anymore to die. Because you just know what death is. You're conscious of what it is.
Just don't.
In fact, there's no distinction between life and death. So you can become so conscious that you realize that when you die, you don't go anywhere because there's nowhere to go. Because the idea that there's a here and a there, like while I'm alive, I'm here, but when I'm dead, I'll be somewhere else. This idea of being here or there, this is a duality in and of itself. There is no here or there. Everywhere is one place. Everywhere is nowhere. So try to maybe look at it from this perspective. Try to imagine that you were never actually born. And that even though you think you were born, you're sitting there right now, but right now, everything you've ever experienced, your whole life, that you've called your life and you've called birth and all this, that all of this has been death the entire time. So imagine that this video, my voice is speaking to you. I'm speaking to you in your death. You're already dead. Because you were never alive. You were only alive as an idea. That idea, alive, that's part of the identity you constructed for yourself. See? And when you quote unquote die, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be right here. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. Of course, these are very uncomfortable truths that nobody wants to admit. See, as a society, we've demonized death so badly. As a society, we've created a cultural reality out of death. Literally, we've brainwashed ourselves. Millions and billions of people have come together to brainwash ourselves that death is bad and horrible and terrible, and that we should avoid it at all costs. And why have we done so? Because if we didn't do so, we wouldn't be here to talk about it. This is what survival entails. This is the core lie at the heart of survival. This is the core falsehood of survival, is that survival is fighting furiously to defend something which is completely unreal. Imagine that. What would you do with yourself? How would you live life if you realized that death was completely unreal and was just a social construction? If you no longer had fear of death, how might that change your attitude towards life, towards work, towards relationships? What would you do? Would there be anything left to fear anymore after you realize that death is an illusion?
On pause, Leo.
You see, fear is a hell of a powerful tool of self-deception.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, let's say there was some deep, profound truth that the devil wanted to hide from you. If we imagine a devil. The devil wants to hide this truth from humanity. How would the devil hide this truth? Would he bury it in the middle of the earth? Would he shoot it into outer space where nobody could get to it? How would he hide it from mankind? He would just simply veil it in fear. That's it. Because anything that mankind deeply, deeply fears, mankind doesn't explore. And what does mankind fear more than death? Nothing. Death is the ultimate thing that mankind fears. So it's very easy for the devil to hide truth simply by cloaking it in fear and calling it death. And that's exactly what the devil has done, metaphorically speaking, is the devil has labeled the most truest thing there is, truth with a capital T, love with a capital L, infinity with a capital I, God with a capital G, has labeled that death. And so you might wonder, well, Leo, why is enlightenment such a secret, and why are so few people enlightened? It's very simple. You might wonder, why is there no evidence of God? Because you've called God death. You might wonder, Leo, where is this love? You keep talking about infinite love. Where is the infinite love? I don't see it. Because you've called it death. You see how tricky you are? This is the very heart of devilry, what we're talking about here. This is the most fundamental deception that the devil does. The devil needs to pervert the truth and call it falsehood, and turn falsehood and call it into truth.
Wow, so that was pretty heavy.
Wowzers.
Pretty interesting. You want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've watched a lot of Leo's content, and I think he's a pretty smart guy. And it's interesting to me that he would talk about something that almost guaranteed most people that give this the time of day are going to turn into a belief. You know, like, how are you supposed to... It's like so counterintuitive. I can just imagine most people watching that being like, what are you talking about? Death is God. Yeah. And what are you talking about? That, like, what literally do you mean? How is death God? And how is life not life? And you know, like with no context or reference point, like I can't see people grasping that very well. But the idea is, right, that to understand what he's saying, I think the point is to get you excited about pursuing enlightenment so that you understand, so that you can understand what death is.
Yeah, and that was just like a snippet of of that video. That video was like an hour and 30 minutes long.
All his videos are like that.
So yeah, that was like a short one. So I'll leave a link to that video in our description so you can go there and check out the rest of that to give yourself better context for what he's talking about. And it's definitely worth listening to.
Even as a belief, even if it is a belief, it is comforting as a belief to think that on the other side of what you're most terrified of is something wonderful. That is like a nice belief, but it's a belief, right?
Exactly.
And he's trying to make the distinction between belief and experience of it, because when he says that he's died many times, what he's talking about is awakening experiences, right? Or just probably like altered states of consciousness equated with.
And he would say that things that help you get to that area would be like all types of aesthetic spiritual practices like yoga, meditation, but he's also a psychonaut. If you follow him, he does a lot of psychedelics, which he says, help them accelerate that process.
But deserve a huge cautionary
disclaimer on. Which he does videos on too, saying like, you should be worried about taking psychedelics. So you got to take it all with a grain of salt. You got to mull over it. You really got to think of it, about what's being said. But it's definitely interesting to think about, death and the other side, because we all think about it. And I think you brought this point up to me before, is like, don't you find it funny that like in school, the one thing that everyone's going to experience is death, yet there's not a subject in school that talks about it.
I don't know if I said school, but I do find it interesting that it's the most unifying thing about being anything is that everybody's headed towards death. That's like the one thing everybody has in common, that and being born. Born and dying, right? And it very rarely gets talked about. I find people don't want to sit and think about it because it's a big question mark. Why, and how strange that the most common thing we have is a big question mark. Now, you could also think of it in terms of a lot of people. No, people do acknowledge it in large groups. There's whole religions formed around coping with it. That's true. But I mean, the idea of mulling over exactly that's how you're going to prepare. How do you live to prepare for that? You know, if it's not from a religious place, what other way can you talk about it?
It's hard. I had time to think about it. 4 months of sitting in this room by myself as Mom was going through her stuff. Our mother, she passed from cancer. She had pretty bout. She fought it as best she could, but she was old, right? I spent hours in here just thinking about it as I was quiet, putting up walls and stuff like that, just mulling over it. I think that kind of actually helped me, through that situation. I hermited myself, which I normally don't do. I'm not a hermity person. I think you're more comfortable with isolation and stuff.
I get my hermit on.
But I think it was good for me at that time to kind of like have that time by myself. Many times just like I'm in here working, like crying, thinking about what was going to happen, what was going to go on, how it was going to go down, It's hard, when someone passes, but...
No, I think that's common. I think everybody kind of processes a death. Everybody's got their own way of processing it, and, that was a pretty hardcore way of doing it. Becoming Bob Vila for 3 months.
But I think... I actually made like an effort not to run away from that situation, but to actually mull in it.
I did the same thing. After she passed and after all like the ceremonial stuff was over, I took some time to like literally just like sit and we're thinking about this now. All right, let's like address it and think about it and go through it and even kind of have a letting go part of it, like a goodbye. That's enough now.
Yeah.
But it still comes up.
Yeah,
which is I think probably normal too. Is for it to still come to the surface, but yeah.
But I don't know. You guys, let us know what you think about that video. Is that just outlandish quackery craziness, or do you think there's something valid? Do you think there's some truth in what he said? And if you think there is, let us know what you think that is. What you think about it. But I think we've gone on long enough on this one of our longer ones. But hey guys, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and share. And everybody, until next time,
Stay spiritual.